If you're like me, you look at foldable phones and think there's certainly some really neat aspects to them, but they're also filled with compromises compared to typical smartphones, especially in regards to their cameras. They're never as good as their candy bar counterparts with their flagship specs, so it always feels like you have to settle for simply okay cameras to get a foldable. With the Find N3 Flip, Oppo sought to provide a flagship-like camera experience within a foldable. That way you don't have to look at the cameras as a limiting consideration for a foldable. So in this review, we'll see how well they achieved that goal, the potential compromises they had to make to get there, what the overall experience is like using it, and how we might end up seeing this in the United States. If you're new here, hey hi, my name is M. Brandon Lee here from This Is Tech Today, where I talk about all things tech and how it intersects with our everyday lives, whether creative, business, or anything else. So now that I've introduced myself, how about we talk about some hardware? The Oppo Find N3 Flip comes in cream gold, misty pink, and sleek black colors, and leaves behind any textured matte finish options, and instead going for the glossy, fingerprint-prone dust magnet designs that I've learned are more desired in the East than the West. Personally, I prefer the textured black on the N2 Flip, but maybe that's because I'm from America. Despite that, the Oppo Find N3 Flip feels nicer in the hand than the N2 Flip because of a subtle increase of the curve on the outside and along the frame, where you'll also find the fingerprint sensor power button combo. Much like what people's experiences have been between the iPhone 14 Pro and the 15 Pro, that curve makes it fit in your hand more naturally and comfortably. I like it. The hinge has 25% more friction than the N2 Flip, which gives it a more confident and sturdy feel with the ability to hold different positions better. They've also added an alert slider to make it easy to move between ring, vibrate, and silent, which is something OnePlus, who is now a sub-brand of Oppo, has been known for. Then there's the dramatically changed camera module, which we'll talk about later, and the removal of the Oppo logo from the hinge, which I want you to bookmark in your brain for later on in the video. When you look at other clamshell foldables that have come out this past year, they've expanded their external screens. This can be quite nice if you simply want a larger screen, but introduces two problems. It limits the number of cameras along with the size of the sensors used for those cameras. It also introduces additional software hurdles to get over due to their atypical aspect ratios and camera placements. That results in inconsistent software experiences. The trade-off to have a larger screen may be worth it to some though. The Oppo Find N3 Flip chose to stay with a 3.26-inch screen, an aspect ratio that mimics that of a normal smartphone's aspect ratio. This year, Oppo added more convenient interactions and features to the external display, like always on display with quick widgets, 2D and 3D cover screen pets, an app drawer so you're not flipping through cards forever, and most importantly, support for select full apps for power users that want a full smartphone-like experience. It's a bit crazy being able to check Twitter, Gmail, Google Calendar, Telegram, Spotify, play games, and more on the external display without having to unfold it. My personal favorite app to use on the cover display is Google Maps. You can quickly take your phone out of your pocket, glance at the screen, and keep walking. This is perfect for walking around the city. You can even look at TikTok, which does look kind of cute on this little screen. By the way, go follow me on TikTok at This Is Tech Today. Using a keyboard on the cover display is less than ideal, but I'm glad it's there. Thankfully, you can simply flip it open and it'll seamlessly transition to the 6.8-inch Full HD Plus AMOLED main screen, where that task may make a bit more sense. That main screen is an LTPO high refresh rate screen that goes from 1 Hz all the way up to 120 Hz to reduce power when needed, and looks super smooth when you would notice it. They adjusted the polarizer so you can easily see your screen even if you're wearing sunglasses, and it has the added benefit of using 20% less power. And for those of you that are sensitive to PWM flickering, this has 1440 Hz PWM dimming, so your risk of getting headaches and eye strain are greatly reduced. To avoid reflections, it has a very impressive anti-reflective film and a bright 1600 nit peak brightness to help counter out any of that glare. Oppo stands out there as one of the best out there for having a foldable screen that doesn't have much of a crease, something that those of us in America are often left with our options only from Samsung and Google. Also, Oppo has already had a few generations under its belt, and it shows. The hardware feels mature, refined, and high quality to the point that it makes the Pixel Fold feel more like a prototype. The Oppo Find N3 Flip is not perfect though. It maintains an IPX4 water resistance rating, which is a bit lower than other foldables out there with an IPX rating, including the Pixel Fold. Because the N3 Flip is powered by the MediaTek Dimensity 9200 chipset, this phone is fast and smooth for normal use, gaming, and 4K video shooting without lag. With the built-in Hyper Boost module to check performance, you can see that I was able to get between 55 to 60 frames per second on the highest graphics settings while playing Genshin Impact, which is phenomenal. PUBG could get a solid 40 frames per second consistently at maxed out settings, and like every other phone, it gets warm while playing games, but nothing that feel uncomfortable or concerning about. To be honest, I'm really impressed with the gaming performance on this. Alongside the processor is a 4300 mAh battery that supports 44-watt SuperVOOC fast charging with the included charging brick in the box. Unfortunately, Oppo continues the trend of not including wireless charging, which is disappointing. At least the Oppo Find N3 Flip lasted me throughout the day without any feelings that it's underperforming other smartphones in any noticeable or notable way. It's typical. The speakers are surprisingly wide sounding, clear, and a bit bassier sounding compared to the Oppo Find N2 Flip, but it's still not particularly full sounding. They're loud enough if you want to listen to a podcast and set it on the counter, but they do suffer from having a bit of an uneven balance with the bottom firing speaker being louder than the top earpiece speaker. If the speakers don't do it for you, maybe there's a solution for you from this video's sponsor, Soundcore and the AeroFit Pros. These guys are great if you want a non-invasive, open ear design for listening to music, podcasts, YouTube videos, or whatever else while being able to hear your surroundings well because your ears aren't all plugged up or covered. This is great if you're working out and going out for a jog and adds a bit of extra safety since you're aware of your surroundings. Plus, it has an IPX5 water resistance. They're also super comfortable because they gently wrap around your ear and surprisingly stay on well when you're active without feeling like they're clamping down on you. There's even a detachable and adjustable frame for a more secure fit. And despite their open ear design, they're shockingly directional and full sounding because of their 16.2mm oversized drivers and their AI processing with base-up technology to give you a full sounding low end. They'll last you up to 14 hours on one charge or 46 hours with the case at a great price. And if you want a more everyday convenient option, the normal AeroFits are also available. Find out more about the Soundcore AeroFit Pros and pick them up by clicking the link in the description. Thanks to Soundcore for sponsoring this portion of the video. As for software, ColorOS doesn't bother me at all, and I think it looks fairly clean, uncluttered, and relatively customizable for the typical things. The only big issue I have are all the extra apps pre-installed. At least you can uninstall those. The camera system consists of a 50 megapixel f1.8 aperture camera with OIS for their main lens, a 48 megapixel f2.2 ultra-wide camera, and a 32 megapixel f2.0 portrait camera. This is conveniently the same camera specs and options that you can find on the OnePlus 11, which I reviewed and thought was a great phone. You can watch a review for this phone up here. Much like how I felt with the OnePlus 11, the cameras are quite good, especially for a foldable, but I think the processing is even better on the N3 Flip. I especially love how it processes photos to allow a more contrasty look. Shadows in darker areas are shadowy and dark. A lot of phones would HDR the heck out of it so that everything is lifted in the shadows, but that makes everything look flat and uninteresting to me. I find that the N3 Flip brings down the highlights far more than raises the shadows, and I personally agree with that decision. And while I prefer the colors that you see on flagship Xiaomi phones with their Leica lenses and processing, I still think the colors on the N3 Flip look good, and the processing does a good job of cleaning up an image and making it look sharp. The blue skies are a bit too blue for me though. The main lens is the best sensor, which is typical. It is easy to get a detailed shot with great separation between the subject and background for that nice bokeh blur. While the ultra-wide doesn't naturally handle low light as well as the main sensor, it is a ton of fun to use, especially when you use the external cover display to easily see what it's recording. This is perfect for selfies or vlogging in good light. Now, as you can probably tell, the front-facing cameras are not very good at night in comparison to the options you have on the rear, like this ultra-wide camera. And you can see that the image clears up quite a bit when you go to the 1x focal length or the main sensor compared to the ultra-wide. Ultra-wide doesn't capture as much light, so it has a little bit more grain. The portrait lens is decent and only goes to a native 2x zoom, which I think isn't super useful. It should at least go to 3 or 4x at a minimum. And it's hard to deny that it's clearly the weakest lens, resulting in less detail and more noise, especially in the dark. It even struggles to kick in when I want it to. So I often took some photos in the 2x or 5x mode, and it was a digital crop rather than the actual portrait sensor. I also noticed this had to do with exposure, or how bright and dark an area is, and it'll jump between the digital crop and the actual sensor immediately when you point at different areas of the exposure range. And unfortunately, I did notice that the phone has a bit of a shutter lag, so the photo I think I initially captured and what it actually processed ended up being a little bit different. This is a bit unfortunate for those with squirrely pets or kids. What makes the camera so much fun is the use of the form factor and that cover screen. Being able to use the main lenses over the internal camera, which is just okay, is a huge plus. This makes it easy to film yourself because it has a built-in tripod. You can take pictures of a group of friends without excluding anyone by holding up your spread open palm, and that little screen makes monitoring and framing yourself easy and fun. The one downside is that you're limited to filming in 1080p when using the external display, and it doesn't default back to 4K when you stop using that external display. And that resulted in a lot of videos being filmed in a lower resolution than you intended. And this was the case on the Oppo Find N3 Flip, so it's disappointing that it's still here and they haven't fixed it. But at least you can record at 4K using the selfie camera. Overall, the camera is quite good and fun to use. The biggest downside is consistency and expectations. While I don't find the iPhone on default settings to have the kind of style or look that I like the most with photos, and the Pixel doesn't have the craziest camera hardware specs out there, they're quite consistent. When you click on the shutter button with those phones, you kind of have an idea of what you're going to get, and it follows through most of the time. On the Find N3 Flip, I find that I'm not always sure what I'm going to get, and it does miss more often than I prefer. And in many ways, it's hard to quantify expectation and results. It's kind of a gut feeling, and I think if you've used an iPhone or Pixel for a while and then you use this phone, you'll get the same gut feeling. I think if Oppo can figure this part out, that would help out a lot. Now, the unfortunate thing about the Oppo Find N3 Flip is how it's not coming to the United States. Well, at least in this form. Remember how the logo is not on the actual frame of the device of the N3 Flip? Well, we're circling back to that part. If you didn't know, Oppo is owned by BBK Electronics, a multinational conglomerate that also owns the brand OnePlus, who has the Fold style open coming to the US on the same day an Oppo device is coming out abroad. Add in the fact that the camera configuration is the same on the OnePlus 11 and the Oppo Find N3 Flip, and there's also a OnePlus slider, you can see how blurred the lines can be between companies, which, I'll be honest, I think is proving to be a good thing. It is highly possible that they'd like to release the Oppo Find N3 Flip in the United States under the OnePlus brand if there's enough interest and demand. It is far easier to print a different logo on a piece of glass compared to changing the logo on the frame. Overall, what Oppo is doing to emphasize higher quality cameras in a foldable is well needed and appreciated, even if they aren't truly flagship tier sensors, lenses, and decisions. I still wish they had a 3x or 4x telephoto on here instead of 2x, but greater competition that creates better options from Samsung and Google is a great thing. So the question is, are you interested in the Oppo Find N3 Flip? If you're in the United States, would you seriously buy one if it was here under the OnePlus brand? Let me know in the comments why you would or wouldn't, and what would convince you to buy one. I'd love to hear your thoughts. This review of the Oppo Find N3 Flip is made possible because of a review sample provided by Oppo. However, they do not receive any sort of editorial input or control, and they're seeing it at the same time as you. Thanks for watching This Is Tech Today. Until next time.